Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea reaches a deal to buy vaccines from Moderna. With those doses for 20 million people plus the others, it'll have more than enough for its entire population. The South Korean government is rolling out a third round of relief payments to support small businesses and workers whose livelihoods are at risk in the pandemic. Direct payments to be made starting next month once the plan is approved. And from today, a South Korean court is authorized to start liquidating the assets of a Japanese company, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, to compensate the Koreans the company subjected to forced labor during World War II. But Mitsubishi is expected to appeal. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has struck a deal with the American biotech company Moderna to secure enough vaccine doses for 20 million people. The agreement was reached Monday evening Korea time in a video call between President Moon and Moderna's CEO. If it goes according to plan, that means South Korea has secured more than enough doses for its population. Kim Min-ji reports.
Moderna will be providing 40 million doses of its vaccine to South Korea, which is enough for 20 million people. The deal was reached Monday evening Korea time during a video call between President Moon Jae-in and Moderna CEO Stefan Bancel. The figure is twice as much South Korea had originally sought to buy, and they also agreed to move up the distribution timeline.
The number of doses is double what South Korea was seeking to buy from Moderna. The price is expected to go down with the larger purchase. We have also agreed to speed up distribution to start in the second quarter of next year, rather than the third. The government and Moderna will be making further efforts to move up that timeline.
The final results of the Moderna vaccine trial confirm that its efficacy is similar to Pfizer's. Although it comes with a slightly higher price tag, it can be more easily stored and distributed. The top office said that South Korea is aiming to complete the official contract with Moderna before the end of the year. Also during the call, Moon and Bancel agreed to ink a memorandum of understanding for R&D cooperation between Moderna and South Korea's State Institute on Infectious Diseases. They also agreed to cooperate in terms of consignment production of Moderna vaccines by South Korean companies. If all goes according to plan, the country will have procured enough doses for 56 million people, more than the country's population. South Korea has so far secured deals for vaccines for 36 million people from AstraZeneca, Janssen, Pfizer, and the COVAX Facility Global Vaccine Supply Platform, with vaccination to start as early as the first quarter of next year. The top office added that negotiations are currently underway with the American company Novavax for the vaccine it's developing and for additional vaccine doses from Pfizer, saying they expect the total number of doses to increase. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Today, December 29th, is the date from which a South Korean court can start the process of liquidating the assets of a Japanese company, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, to compensate the Koreans the company subjected to forced labor during World War II. If and when the court issues the order, Mitsubishi is expected to appeal immediately. Yoon Jung-min reports.
As of Tuesday, Daejeon District Court can deliver an order to liquidate the assets of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, which has ignored a top court ruling in 2018 to compensate the Korean victims of wartime forced labor. This comes as legal documents for public notification, which were issued by the local court in Daejeon, bring the ruling into effect from Tuesday. The liquidation process is expected to begin with an appraisal of the firm's local assets, which will then be auctioned off. In November 2018, South Korea's Supreme Court ordered Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to pay 5 victims of wartime forced labor and their families around $90,000 to $130,000 each in compensation. Daejeon District Court then ordered the seizure of 2 trademarks and 6 patents in March 2019 as Mitsubishi Heavy Industries had failed to follow the Supreme Court ruling. Japan's Kyodo News and NHK reported Tuesday that Mitsubishi plans to immediately appeal. The Japanese firm told the media that the compensation claims have been settled completely and finally by the bilateral treaty in 1965, which was signed to normalize diplomatic relations between Seoul and Tokyo after World War II. The liquidation process is likely to be postponed if the company files an appeal and brings it to court. Japan has also been threatening to retaliate if South Korea goes ahead with the liquidation. In October, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said there will be serious consequences should a Japanese company's assets in Korea be liquidated to compensate the forced labor victims. Japanese media have been citing the dispute as one reason why Suga is not traveling to Seoul for an annual trilateral summit with South Korea and China. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
South Korea plans to roll out a third round of COVID-19 relief funds in January to help small businesses and workers that have been put at risk in the pandemic. A payment of at least 1 million won, or about $900, and up to 3 times that will be coming to small businesses across the board. Min Soo-kyun reports.
South Korea on Tuesday announced it will offer another round of disaster relief funds to support various businesses and workers across the country. Under the latest plan, around 5 trillion Korean won, or roughly $5 billion will be spent on emergency handouts and low-interest loans to support small business owners deemed to be hardest hit by the pandemic. Up to 3 million Korean won will be given to the businesses, which had to temporarily close or restrict their hours of operation due to strict social distancing guidelines. Also, at-risk workers such as freelancers, delivery drivers, insurance planners, and childcare workers will receive cash payments worth around 500,000 to 1 million won. To help fight the outbreak, an additional 800 billion won will be used for COVID-19 testing and treatment, and the remaining 2.9 trillion won will be tailored to support specific groups, such as families who need money for child support, as well as those who lost their jobs amid the pandemic. South Korea's Deputy Prime Minister Hong Nam-gi said that the new stimulus package was carefully designed to help ease the financial difficulties of those suffering from the pandemic's economic fallout.
A total of 9.3 trillion won has been drawn up to support some 5.8 million who are expected to benefit from the stimulus package.
The government plans to approve the deal during a cabinet meeting next Tuesday and will start distributing the funds from January 11th. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, hope you had a nice holiday. Good to have you back on.
Good afternoon.
Well, stocks on Wall Street closed at new record highs on Monday as the House agreed to increase the stimulus checks to $2,000. The Dow up almost 0.7%, the S&P a little more. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, the Dow Jones climbed to about 30,000 now, rising by about 0.7%, breaking the record high. And the S&P 500 also gained about 0.9% and hit the 3,735 level. And NASDAQ added another 0.7%. It's almost close to 13,000. Clearly, the news that the President Donald Trump unexpectedly signed an economic relief bill that averted the government shutdown and extended the unemployment benefits. Now, House is expected to vote on the $2,000 direct payment, which is actually passed now, I think. So if you look at the level of the fiscal boosting measure, it's clearly a very strong one. So far, it has been very much focused on monetary policy, where you are seeing M1 growth rate close to 68% and the M2 growth rate at 26%. And this is basically, we haven't seen these kind of level of the boosting measure on a monetary side. And now with the fiscal stimulus that's coming, it is also another record high level. If you look at as a percentage of GDP, you can look at that as about 20% of overall GDP on a global scale, not just the U.S. So clearly, these are quite significant number, and that is why it's fueling in the equity market rise, because people are expecting the economic recovery will be coming sometime in the first quarter of next year.
Well, in the Korean markets today, it was ex-dividend day, so a high volume, choppy session on both the Kospi and the Kosdaq. They were both up. Tell us about the local markets.
Yes, the local market was up quite nicely for Kospi by about 0.4%. This is actually continued to rise from the previous session as well. And particularly for the Kosdaq, it has risen by more than 3% because Kosdaq has been a little bit laggard to the Kospi in the recent a few sessions of the market. Clearly, the optimistic, thanks to the Brexit and stimulus news coming from the Europe and U.S., and also Korea's expected earnings. If you look at it, it is expected to rise by close to by about 25% plus next year because the global economic recovery will feed into the export growth rate, and Korea's manufacturing company will be looking quite good with the earnings growth rate coming through. If so, Korea continues to remain as one of the cheaper markets relative to any other market in the world, and it has a very strong manufacturing base, particularly in the semiconductor area, which is expected to grow very rapidly in year 2021.
Well, switching gears here, we see consumer sentiment in Korea has fallen, according to the latest report, for the first time in 3 months. In December, it's down more than 8 points from last month, but the outlook for home prices is at an all-time high. What do you make of these numbers, Mr. Yu?
Yes, if you look at the composite consumer sentiment index, it declined to 89.8 points in December from 97.9, so quite a bit of a drop, and it is falling for the first time in a 3-month in the past 3 months. All 6 sub-indexes declined, dragging mainly by the current domestic economic conditions and the prospective domestic economic conditions as the COVID-19 uncertainty weighed quite heavily. Meanwhile, the future household spending is down by slightly, and future household income is down by a very slight amount. So clearly, this is the area that you are seeing some of the level that's quite decent. If you look at the overall housing prices, it is expected to rise even further from the record high that you're seeing in November, and it is hitting at around 132. If you look at the property market, it seems to be at quite overvalued. If you look in terms of price-to-income ratio and price-to-rent ratios, particularly price-to-rent ratio, Korea is one of the most expensive property market in the world. So therefore, we don't expect the property prices to go up any further given the heavy regulation that you're coming to see. And if that's the case, then domestic consumption is not the area that will boost the overall economic growth, but rather it is the external factor. Particularly, we're looking at the export growth rate at two-digit growth rate in next year with the economic recovery happening in the global scale. So we need to separate these two areas, domestic consumption versus export and manufacturing side. We think that we're quite keen to be optimistic about the manufacturing and export.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for coming on today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, despite the pandemic, global stock markets have seen incredible returns in 2020. The South Korean markets have been hitting all-time highs day after day. So will this continue into the new year? Our Kim Sung-min has this report.
South Korea's Kospi passed several milestones this year and hit an all-time high of 2,800. Behind this trend was the massive inflow of new individual investors who saw the sudden collapse of stock prices in March as an opportunity to enter the market. They were also encouraged by low interest rates and the government's policies to support liquidity. Kiwoom Securities, which has the largest number of private investment customers in Korea, saw around 3.2 million new accounts in 2020, 4 times that of the previous year. And many of these investors rushed to buy stocks in 4 sectors.
I'd like to explain what the keyword BBIG, batteries, bio, internet, and games. These sectors dominated the Korean stock market during the rebound from the pandemic. Most of them have benefited from the non-contact transformation.
Vaccines for COVID-19 are another game changer for the stock market. With growing optimism that life can return to normal, stocks that were hardest hit by the pandemic are starting to recover. On Christmas Eve, when the Kospi surpassed the 2,800 mark, stocks in travel, aviation, theme parks, movies, and duty-free saw the largest daily growth after semiconductors. And it's not just the Korean stock market that's booming. The total size of global stock markets amounted to some $100.2 trillion as of December 18th, up 17% on year. Experts say optimism over a vaccine is likely to keep boosting global stock markets in 2021.
I expect 2021 to become a very good market because an economic recovery is expected following the pandemic, and technology stocks are forecast to grow rapidly in 2021, further accelerating the rally in the markets.
However, the expert warns that the actual progress of vaccination could affect the pace of market recovery. Developed countries that started vaccinations earlier will get back to normal faster, seeing their markets growing. Market watchers assume, however, that South Korea is likely to still benefit through increased exports to those revived markets. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
On New Year's Day, the city of Seoul is going to open a new walking path taking people by some of the most important landmarks downtown. In the spring, trees will be planted, and so it's been dubbed the Sejong-daero Forest Road. It goes along one of Seoul's main thoroughfares, Sejong-daero, from which a few lanes have been removed to make room. The Forest Road goes for about 1.5 kilometers from Gwanghwamun Plaza through Sungyemun Gate to Seoul Station. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.